Chapter 1. You can spend years searching for the perfect strategy and still feel unsettled every time you open your platform. The charts change, the rules evolve, the indicators rotate in and out, yet the same tension follows you from system to system. The reason is simple and uncomfortable. Strategies don't execute themselves. A human being does. And markets respond to behavior far more than they respond to clever ideas. The market reacts to state. It reacts to patience. It reacts to restraint. It reacts to how you behave during quiet hours and how you behave when volatility spikes. Intelligence alone does not create consistency. Knowledge alone does not produce steadiness. Execution is shaped by who you are in the moment you click. At some point, a hard truth surfaces. If switching strategies were enough, the search would already be over. You've seen countless setups. You've tested different risk models. You've studied structure, price action, indicators, macro themes. The repetition feels productive because it keeps you busy. Looking outward feels like progress. Looking inward feels vulnerable. I remember sitting in front of my screen after changing systems yet again. Fresh rules, fresh optimism, clean charts. For a few days, everything felt possible. Then the familiar patterns returned. Hesitation before entries, aggression after losses, premature exits after wins. The technical framework shifted. The behavior did not. That realization cut deeper than any drawdown. There was a trader I knew named Aaron. He could explain any model you handed him. He understood risk management, structure, liquidity, timing. His notes were meticulous. His execution was unstable. After a red streak, he refined entries. After a green streak, he expanded exposure. He believed complexity would solve inconsistency. The real shift came when he began observing his reactions instead of refining his charts. Within months, his results changed without any major technical overhaul. The system remained familiar. His state did not. If you've ever felt like every system looks brilliant in hindsight and unreliable in real time, that gap lives inside you, not inside the chart. Trading exposes patterns most people never confront so directly. How you handle uncertainty, how you react to boredom, how you behave when no one is watching, how you respond when money fluctuates in front of your eyes. Those patterns originate from identity. Identity does not evolve because you memorized a new entry condition. It evolves through awareness under pressure. This is why trading feels unique compared to other skills. More effort does not guarantee better performance. More information does not guarantee sharper execution. The market rewards alignment. Alignment comes from internal steadiness. I once believed discipline meant force, clenching your jaw, holding yourself rigid, suppressing impulses. That approach worked in bursts. Fatigue eventually broke it. What replaced it was something quieter: observation, acceptance of my tendencies under stress, recognition that no strategy could protect me from myself if I remained unaware. Lena experienced something similar. Her journals overflowed with refinements. She adjusted time filters, entry triggers, confirmation layers. Her charts looked elegant. Her equity curve stayed uneven. One day, she stopped tweaking indicators and began tracking her internal state. She wrote down how she felt before trades, what she feared when she rushed. Within weeks, her consistency improved without a single new technical adjustment. The work shifted inward. Trading starts to feel almost spiritual the moment you realize the market does not respond to desire. It does not react to hope. It reflects your posture. It mirrors impatience. It magnifies attachment. It exposes fear of stillness. That reflection feels relentless. Many traders spend years trying to modify the mirror instead of examining their reflection. You don't need rituals or belief systems to understand this. You need honesty. Honest recognition of when you break your own rules. Honest awareness of when you trade to escape discomfort. Honest acknowledgement of how often you equate movement with progress. There was a season when I noticed I traded most actively during internal restlessness. When price moved quickly, my mind felt occupied. When nothing happened, agitation surfaced. The discomfort had nothing to do with the market. It was my relationship with silence. Until I addressed that, no strategy felt stable for long. Chapter 2. The search for external answers becomes exhausting after a while. You wake up and realize you have consumed more content than you have executed trades, more opinions than repetitions, more theories than lived experience. Instead of clarity, you feel scattered. Intelligence isn't the issue. Alignment is. There was a period where I struggled to sit through slow trades. If price hesitated, anxiety crept in. I adjusted stops, closed early, looked for confirmation elsewhere. The system itself remained solid. My discomfort with waiting was the true variable. I had conditioned myself to equate motion with productivity. Stillness felt threatening. Trading punished that belief repeatedly. I met a trader who limited himself to high volatility sessions. He told himself faster markets matched his personality. Eventually, he tried trading quieter conditions and discovered intense restlessness. Impatience surfaced immediately. The slower environment revealed tendencies he had been avoiding. That exposure became the real training ground. Many poor trades come from boredom rather than fear. That insight alone shifts everything. People often imagine spirituality as detachment from reality. Trading demands the opposite. It requires presence, full attention, awareness of impulse before execution. Any lapse shows up instantly in results. That feedback loop is precise and unforgiving in its honesty. I once believed I needed greater confidence, more certainty before acting. What developed instead was comfort with uncertainty. Familiarity with drawdowns, familiarity with slow weeks, familiarity with imperfect sequences. Familiarity breeds steadiness. Steadiness breeds consistency. Attachment becomes visible quickly in trading. Attachment to being right, attachment to quick progress, attachment to avoiding discomfort. Two traders can follow identical systems and produce different outcomes because attachment distorts decision-making in subtle ways. I used to assign meaning to every trade. Wins represented advancement. Losses represented regression. That constant storytelling drained me. Over time, trades became simpler. They were events inside a distribution, data points rather than verdicts. Removing the narrative reduced emotional volatility without reducing care. Trading reshapes identity gradually. Impatience that disrupts trades appears in other areas of life. Deliberate execution strengthens habits beyond the screen. I noticed my responses outside trading becoming calmer, less reactive, more intentional. The discipline built in front of charts extended into daily interactions. If you expect a dramatic breakthrough where everything suddenly aligns, release that expectation. Progress shows up quietly. You pause before acting. You let setups pass without regret. You accept losses without spirals. Those shifts accumulate. The most difficult realization is that readiness never arrives in a permanent form. Emotions still appear. Frustration visits, doubt surfaces. What changes is how quickly you notice and how rarely you let those emotions dictate behavior. I once thought I had regressed because feelings resurfaced during a flat period. Looking closer, I saw that although frustration appeared, it no longer steered decisions. Awareness existed between impulse and action. That space was growth. Julian described trading as humbling in a way nothing else could. He entered confident in his analytical skill. The market reflected his urgency back at him until he slowed down. The turning point was relinquishing the need to force outcomes. The strategy he already trusted began to function consistently once his internal pressure eased. Trading becomes transformative when you stop treating it as a puzzle to conquer and start treating it as a practice to refine. Practices do not end. They require maintenance. They reward alignment and reveal friction when attention drifts. Confidence fluctuates. Alignment stabilizes. When your standards remain steady regardless of emotion, execution follows a consistent pattern. Losses become information about posture. Wins become confirmation of structure. Identity gradually detaches from short-term outcomes. At this stage, trading shifts from stimulation to discipline. You no longer seek excitement from movement. You seek clarity from repetition. You no longer measure yourself by single sessions. You observe yourself across sequences. If your results reflected your internal state perfectly, what would they say right now? Calm, rushed, distracted, grounded. That question reveals more than any indicator. Eventually, the market teaches the same lesson repeatedly in different forms. Early lessons feel loud. Later lessons feel subtle. Flat periods expose impatience. Quiet growth exposes attachment to intensity. Each phase invites deeper self-observation. Progress stops feeling heroic. It feels measured, slightly cleaner execution, slightly earlier awareness of impulse, slightly less interference. Those small shifts compound over time. The final shift arrives when you stop searching for certainty and begin cultivating presence. You trust repetition more than inspiration. You value regulation over force, stability over stimulation. Strategies are tools. The trader using them determines the outcome. A refined mind amplifies any solid framework. An unstable state distorts even the best system. Trading feels relentless because it refuses to let you hide behind knowledge. It rewards behavior. It reflects posture. It reveals patterns. When you stop trying to outsmart the market and start refining your internal alignment, change unfolds gradually, quietly, consistently. That is the real work. And once you recognize it, you can never return to chasing strategies as the primary solution. Chapter 3. Sometimes the hardest moment in trading arrives after the obvious struggles are already behind you. Early losses feel loud. Mistakes announce themselves clearly. You know when you broke rules. You know when impatience showed up. The feedback feels immediate. Later, something quieter happens. You begin having stretches where nothing seems dramatically wrong. Losses remain controlled. Wins appear occasionally. The account moves sideways for weeks or even months. Progress exists, yet momentum feels absent. That period confuses people more than failure ever did. Flat performance carries a strange psychological weight. There's no crisis demanding change. There's also no celebration confirming growth. You sit inside repetition without emotional spikes guiding you forward. I remember reviewing a long stretch of trades during one of those periods. Every rule had been followed. Risk stayed consistent. Entries made sense. Yet the results felt stagnant. My instinct was to search for refinement, something sharper, something hidden inside the charts. The charts weren't hiding anything. What surfaced instead was timing. On days when I felt behind financially or emotionally, entries became slightly rushed. When recent trades performed well, hesitation crept in quietly. Neither behavior looked dramatic on a single trade. Across months, they shaped the entire equity curve. The market never argued with me about it. It simply reflected those shifts. Many traders never stay long enough inside that quiet phase to understand what it offers. Silence exposes habits that intensity hides. You start noticing how often you check charts without purpose, how frequently you seek reassurance after neutral days, how easily attention drifts when nothing exciting happens. Boredom becomes a teacher. If you've ever felt irritated during steady progress, pause for a moment and notice what that irritation feels like. It often carries urgency beneath the surface. A desire for confirmation that effort is paying off quickly enough. Trading moves on its own rhythm. Participation requires learning that rhythm gradually. Improvement here feels almost invisible. Slightly cleaner execution. Slightly longer patience before entry. Slightly less interference after losses. None of those moments feel heroic while they're happening. Over time, they reshape outcomes completely. This kind of growth rarely announces itself. You don't suddenly feel transformed. You notice smaller reactions, a pause before clicking, a calmer review after a red session, a willingness to wait through conditions that once created anxiety. Those moments accumulate quietly. The internal work never arrives as a single victory. You notice impatience earlier than before. You recognize frustration sooner. You watch impulses appear and fade without immediate action. Awareness deepens gradually. There was a point where I realized I had stopped refreshing charts constantly. No rule forced that change. The urge simply faded. Execution felt enough. Monitoring every fluctuation stopped feeling necessary. That shift surprised me more than any winning streak ever had. Trading began influencing areas outside the charts. Conversations slowed down. Decisions outside trading carried more intention. Waiting stopped feeling uncomfortable in everyday situations. Presence spreads. The habits developed under financial pressure reshape behavior elsewhere because the underlying patterns remain the same. Reactivity softens. Observation strengthens. Many people expect mastery to feel intense. In reality, it often feels ordinary. You arrive at sessions without needing excitement. You execute without internal negotiation. Wins and losses pass through review without dramatic interpretation. Humility grows naturally during this stage. You stop explaining outcomes to protect identity. Journals replace storytelling. Data replaces justification. Each trade becomes information rather than commentary. Emotion loses leverage when attention stops feeding it constantly. If you're still listening right now, consider sharing this with someone who believes mindset means constant positivity. Trading teaches something quieter, awareness practiced repeatedly under pressure. Eventually, you realize improvement continues long after technical understanding stabilizes. You notice patterns forming before behavior follows them. You feel impatience rising before it reaches your hands. You recognize fatigue before it shapes risk decisions. Those recognitions create space, and inside that space, choice becomes possible. That's where consistency begins to take root. Chapter 4, at a certain point, trading stops feeling like something you are trying to conquer and starts feeling like something you are maintaining. Early on, everything feels like pursuit. You pursue better entries, you pursue cleaner structure, you pursue larger months, you pursue confidence. There's momentum in that phase, there's hunger, there's friction. You feel like you're climbing. Later, something shifts. You sit down at your screen and realize there's nothing to chase. The edge you use is familiar. The risk parameters are defined. The journal format is stable. The platform feels ordinary. What matters now is how you show up inside that structure day after day. That's when trading becomes a practice. A practice doesn't end. It doesn't grant you a certificate that says you've arrived. It rewards alignment when you operate correctly and exposes misalignment when you drift. There is no dramatic announcement when you improve. There is simply smoother execution. I remember the first time I noticed this shift clearly. I took a clean loss, logged it, and felt nothing urgent afterward. No need to reclaim the day. No need to reanalyze immediately. No internal speech about what the loss meant. The trade closed. The journal captured it. The session continued. That neutrality felt unfamiliar in the best way. Earlier in my journey, a red trade carried narrative. It triggered reflection that bordered on interrogation. It prompted subtle tension. Now it felt procedural. One event in a larger sequence. Something inside had stabilized. You begin to notice that confidence becomes less relevant. Some days you feel sharp. Other days you feel slower. Execution stays within range either way. The standard no longer rises and falls with emotion. That steadiness reshapes identity. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who needs to feel ready. You think of yourself as someone who follows structure, regardless of mood. You don't wait for motivation, you rely on repetition. Repetition builds familiarity. Familiarity builds calm. Calm does not feel dramatic, it feels steady. You enter when criteria align, you pass when they don't, you size consistently, you review honestly. There is very little internal negotiation. This is the stage where most people quietly revert. There are no loud mistakes forcing correction. Results may be stable but not spectacular. Improvement feels incremental. The temptation to search externally returns because external change feels exciting. Staying here requires patience with slow growth. You begin to realize that small refinements in behavior create larger long-term impact than new indicators ever did. Slightly cleaner risk management, slightly earlier recognition of fatigue, slightly more restraint during boredom. These refinements accumulate invisibly. There's also a humility that develops naturally. You stop trying to prove discipline. You simply act within it. You stop celebrating every win publicly. You stop dramatizing every loss privately. Outcomes become information. Identity detaches from single trades. When someone asks how trading is going, you answer calmly. You no longer feel the need to present extremes. The work feels steady. The numbers fluctuate within expected range. That shift carries into your daily life as well. You notice you react less quickly in conversations. You pause before responding to stress. You observe before acting. Trading becomes a training ground for presence. There was a period when I realized I no longer checked charts compulsively outside my defined windows. That behavior faded on its own. The urge for constant reassurance had dissolved. The plan was enough. Trust felt earned rather than imagined. This kind of trust doesn't come from belief statements. It comes from seeing your internal patterns repeat so many times that denial becomes impossible. You understand exactly how impatience shows up. You recognize how attachment distorts exits. You know how boredom whispers. Awareness shortens the gap between impulse and recognition, and that gap is everything. Inside it, you choose execution over reaction. You choose structure over emotion. You choose patience over urgency. Over months, those choices shape results more reliably than any single breakthrough ever could. At this stage, trading feels lighter, not easier. Lighter. You don't carry the weight of proving yourself each session. You don't expect dramatic wins to validate effort. You don't interpret quiet periods as failure. You show up, execute, review, repeat. Consistency begins to feel ordinary, and that's when real durability forms. Most people want explosive growth. The market rewards sustainable rhythm. Sustainable rhythm feels calm, almost understated. It rarely attracts attention. It builds longevity. If you've felt glimpses of this stage before, reflect on how different it felt from your early pursuit phase. There's less adrenaline, more clarity, less drama, more stability. Stability compounds. Eventually, you realize trading has stopped being something you are trying to fix. It started being something you are refining. That refinement never ends. It deepens. Chapter 5. Eventually, you reach a point where the market stops feeling like an opponent and starts feeling like a mirror. In the beginning, losses feel like punishment. Later, they feel like feedback. Even later, they feel like information. The market doesn't change during that progression. Your interpretation does. You start to see that every phase you moved through carried the same lesson delivered in different tones. Early on, it was loud. Obvious mistakes, emotional reactions, clear consequences. Later, it became quieter. Flat performance, subtle drift, small inconsistencies that only show up over time. The lesson was always the same: alignment. When your internal state felt rushed, execution rushed. When you felt scattered, trades reflected it. When you felt steady, decisions flowed cleanly. The chart wasn't responding to your intelligence, it was responding to your posture. That realization removes a certain kind of tension. You stop trying to solve trading like a puzzle that has one final missing piece. You begin treating it like a practice that rewards refinement over time. Practices don't end, they deepen. There's a moment where you look back and realize strategy hopping no longer makes sense. The urge disappears. Not because you forced it away, because you understand that a new system would still be executed by the same mind. Until the mind stabilizes, nothing else will. You recognize how impatience used to distort timing, how attachment used to distort exits, how fear used to distort risk. Those distortions didn't require new indicators, they required awareness. Awareness changes behavior gradually. You notice yourself pausing more often. You let trades complete without interfering. You sit through boredom without searching for stimulation. You accept quiet weeks without scrambling for novelty. None of this feels dramatic. It feels steady. The external results begin to reflect that steadiness over time. Drawdowns shorten, overtrading decreases, equity curves smooth out. The growth may not look explosive, it looks durable. Durability is underrated. You also begin to understand that trading reshaped you beyond the screen. The patience learned during consolidation phases appears in conversations. The emotional regulation developed during drawdowns shows up during conflict. The discipline practiced in risk management influences other decisions. The market trained something deeper than entry precision. There's a quiet confidence that forms here. It doesn't spike, it stabilizes. You don't need to convince yourself you're disciplined. You see it in your actions. You don't need constant reassurance. Repetition built trust. Trust in yourself becomes the real edge. Not trust that every trade will win. Trust that you will behave consistently regardless of outcome. That distinction changes everything about how trading feels. You stop trying to control the market. You focus on regulating yourself. Regulation creates stability. Stability creates consistency. Consistency creates results over time. There's no ceremony when you arrive here, no dramatic realization. One day you simply notice that sessions feel calmer, that losses don't spiral, that wins don't inflate you, that boredom doesn't push you into unnecessary trades, the noise quiets. You still experience emotion, you still feel tension sometimes. The difference is that those feelings no longer steer behavior automatically. You observe them. You let them pass. You act according to structure. That's maturity. The search that once consumed you loses urgency. You no longer wake up hunting for the next secret. You wake up prepared to execute what you already understand. The market becomes less mysterious and more precise. It reflects cause and effect consistently. It rewards alignment steadily. It exposes drift immediately, and once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. Trading stops being about finding something new. It becomes about maintaining clarity, maintaining discipline, maintaining awareness. That maintenance is ongoing. There is no final level where uncertainty disappears. There is no point where emotion stops arising. There is only increasing familiarity with your own patterns and increasing ability to regulate them. Over time, that regulation builds something far more valuable than a high win rate. It builds sustainability. You sit down tomorrow with the same charts, the same tools, the same edge. The difference lives in how you show up. Calm, deliberate, observant, you execute, you review, you refine. The market continues doing what it has always done, and you continue refining who you are inside it. That is the work. And once you understand that, strategy hopping loses its appeal forever.